All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. Excellencies, colleagues, if I can ask you to take your seats, please. Can't hear? You can? Is it possible to hear? Yeah. Maybe if you put on the headset. Perfect. All right. Welcome, everybody. Excellencies and colleagues, welcome to our event today. My name is Courtney Hood, and I'm the head of the New York Liaison Office of IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. It's very much a pleasure to welcome you to this side event on remittances and diaspora investment for rural development. For those of you in the audience, we have interpretation in English, French, and Spanish. So if this is something you need, please do take advantage. All right. Excellencies, each year, migrants send close to $650 billion to low and middle income countries. For millions of families, these resources are essential, supporting food, health, education, and daily needs. But beyond this immediate impact, there is a broader question that brings us together today. How do we move from remittances as a lifeline to remittances as a driver of transformation? This discussion takes place in the context of the International Migration Review Forum and speaks directly to Objectives 19 and 20 of the Global Compact, mobilizing diaspora investment and strengthening remittance systems to support sustainable development. We will explore these key issues in 3 segments today. We have about 1 hour and 15 minutes. We'll open with a series of welcoming remarks from our event co-organizers. It will be followed by high-level remarks and then an in-depth expert panel with an interactive discussion. So please feel free to raise your hand during that discussion. We want to hear from all of you. Again, for those of you who just joined, we have interpretation in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish. We have an excellent set of speakers. We know we want to hear from them, so we can get started right away. First, I'm very pleased to turn to His Excellency Ambassador Jérôme Bonafort, Permanent Representative of France to the United Nations. France this year holds the G7 presidency. You're also co-organizer of the campaign for the International Day of Family Remittances, so doing quite a bit to champion this issue. Ambassador, please, over to you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam the representative of IFAD. Mr. Minister, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, I would like to remind you that for the second time in a few years, the world is confronting a food crisis. And this has to remind us that the goal of agricultural development is at the heart of any development policy in anywhere. It is not a way to cancel or not recognize the value of exchange. We have to look at the reality face to face, and the truth is that the changes and the geopolitical crises and the vulnerabilities that arise from climate change, they are at the top of urgent priorities, namely the food security, and therefore it is very relevant to pose the question today to understand how the revenues that they send to their families and their countries of origin, how could they be used for the development of these countries? we are not seeing things from an angle that these funds should be constrained in any way. The principle of freedom to use one's revenue by the migrant and the receiver. Obviously, this principle is fundamental and crucial. However, we have to look at the financial systems, whether at the international or the national level. How could they be built to attract the migrant to use these resources, that they would serve at the same time the development of their own country and the well-being of their families. These two goals are compatible. I would like to underscore that even in our national policy, we have built these policies to have these resources be allocated that would allow people to save and also to serve the goals of industrial development for a number of our countries. I believe these two goals are compatible, and I would like to thank you, IFAD, that they have decided to underscore this issue, to be more concrete today. The meeting of we in Africa Forward Summit, and I am delighted that the representative of Kenya is here today, and the meeting of G7. And in both of these meetings, this subject is very interesting. And why? For the Africa Forward Summit, the issue of agricultural development in Africa is very important, and these are the issues that we should be or want to be brought up. And what could we do to foster this development? And within the G7, we were able to convince our partners that international solidarity should stay at the heart of the discussions. And we heard a few days ago, and we had a ministerial meeting of the G7, and to agree on a number of priorities. We are not at a moment where the public aid to development is the only subject being discussed. We have to renew the definition of international solidarity. It seems to us, for us French people, that the adaptation of international financial systems, so they would be better at the service of the goals of countries that do receive them, and they are built in a manner that lower their cost, it would be a good way to approach this matter. We do not accept that we have to have this false choice, trade or aid. No, I believe that that's not how things are said. However, it's said in a more complex manner. However, these complex networks, I believe these some of the goals that we have to work on. What we ask that the money that migrants send to their families is better used to serve also development, namely the receiving countries. I believe that's a very legitimate subject to examine. Doesn't mean that we want to regulate how migrants want to use their funds. We have to design attractive mechanisms that would lower the cost of these transfers and propose of those who are doing them efficient mechanism where the money is used. So this is, I have a note that well done for me, how we have gone about it at national level. But I would like to leave the floor to my colleagues around the table. I would like to thank IFAD and my colleagues from Guatemala, Nigeria, Morocco, and I forget some of them for their presence and their participation in this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think for giving a good outline of the complexity of leveraging some of these resource flows, but also some practical solutions. And our thanks to you as well for placing this so centrally within your G7 presidency agenda. Now, let me turn to Mr. Victor Ramirez Scalia, General Consul of the Republic of Guatemala, who's also been a key partner in the adoption of the International Day of Family Remittances. Sir, over to you.
Muchas gracias.
Cordial greetings to all of the members here at the table and representatives of civil society, the private sector, and special guests. It is an honor to be present at this important event on behalf of the government of Guatemala in this space, which is called Remittances and Diaspora Investment for Rural Development, organized by the French G7 presidency and the International Fund for Agricultural Development in the second forum reviewing international migration. We would like to thank you for convening us to this space, which is creating a tangible link between development and human mobility. As the General Consul of Guatemala in New York, I would like to thank the participation of the diaspora as the axis for development. Guatemala recognizes with gratitude the untiring effort of its diaspora, its Guatemalan citizens abroad, specifically in the United States and Latin America, not only for the financial contribution, but also with the culture that they're representing at the countries that are receiving them. The official numbers from the Bank of Guatemala clearly reflect this reality. In 2024, Guatemala received $21 billion in family remittances, which represented 0.8% vis-a-vis the previous year. And in 2025, we reached a historical challenge of $25 billion, consolidating our remittances as one of the main income for our economies. And 2026, from January through March, we reached $6 billion and $90 million of remittances in Guatemala. And this clearly reflects the spirit of the international migration reform and maximizing the positive impact of migration in sustainable development. We're meeting besides at a very timely moment when the international system is facing challenges, fulfilling certain political commitments and making them concrete, which include financial development, entrepreneurship, and employment in rural areas. For Guatemala, this subject represents a tangible reality because family remittances are a source of economic growth, reflecting 20% of the GDP, which generates a tremendous social impact for the population, but above all, for the well-being of the Guatemalan families, mainly the ones who are in rural areas. But behind each number, there's a story. There's a mother who receives support to feed her family, a young man who can continue his studies, a community which is that finds opportunities where no opportunities existed before. Family remittances spur income growth, and we also have to center our efforts so that these funds are invested productively through education programs and financial inclusion, maximizing a positive impact of these remittances as a tool that will transform the Guatemalan population. A poll carried out in Guatemala for migrants and remittances reflected that the use of these funds is mainly destined towards consumption, but we can also visualize it be invested in health and education besides buying raw materials for small businesses. In that context, the true institutional and social challenge consists in building programs to create incentives for families of not only using them for consumption, but for productive growth. Guatemala has a financial inclusion project for 2024-2027 with a goal of broadening and the access to financial products and services, mainly for women and children or young people. The importance of linking the remittances with the financial system so that they become savings, investments, and entrepreneurs, and so that this income spurs local development. Only through financial formalization and supporting small entrepreneurs will lead for Guatemalans abroad to help local development. We also believe that the importance of generating adequate situations and promoting actions that can create new opportunities for the remittances through safe and orderly and regular migration through temporary workers programs, so the Guatemalan workers can access jobs abroad. Guatemala celebrates this space for dialogue and cooperation and reiterates its willingness to contribute constructively to the discussions and best practices developed here, convinced that remittances and investment can be true drivers of local transformation and sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Excellent to get a sense of the scale and impact at the national level. I'm now very pleased to finish our opening segment with you, Mr. Minister, Your Excellency Hans Leo Cactac, Secretary of the Department of Migrant Workers from the Republic of the Philippines. The Philippines has championed as well the International Day of Family Remittances since its adoption in 2018. So lots of leadership in this sector. Mr. Minister, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's an honor to be with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the French presidency of the G7, and the Permanent Mission of Guatemala to the United Nations in bringing together this side event on remittances and diaspora investment for rural development. The Philippines, with over 10 million overseas Filipinos, half of whom would be temporary migrant workers, continues to reach record highs with cash inflows sent through banks rising 3.3% year-on-year to US dollars 35.63 billion in 2025. With such potential, our government is duty-bound to harness and turn this into an opportunity to advance migrant workers as core architects of national development. I would also care to add that our remittances behavior has been counter-cyclical in nature, meaning to say crises do not largely affect the remittance behavior of our overseas workers, overseas Filipinos. And by way of example, during the COVID period, at least in the strictest lockdown phase in 2020, our remittances only decreased by around 0.1%. And in other economic crises in the last 20, 30 years, even had increased. In some small way, had increased. So we do consider migrant workers as core architects of national development by empowering them through capacity building programs and strategic partnerships with other government agencies. Our goal is to translate the hard work of our workers into meaningful livelihood and sustainable investments. Remittances are translated into long-term economic stability, improved livelihoods, and meaningful contributions to their families and communities. And to ensure that migrant workers maximize the gains in their migration effort, we have initiatives to, number one, reduce the cost of remittances, and number two, turn remittances into investments and programs and services of government that redound back to the benefit of migrant workers and their families. So our Banco Central has spearheaded innovative solutions for reducing remittance costs. There are various studies, including a World Bank study, which indicates that the Philippine migrant worker corridors, at least selected corridors, are among the lowest in terms of not just remittances, but also recruitment costs. So the cost of sending US dollars 200 to the Philippines has consistently stayed around 4% of the amount remitted, still aiming to go with the SDG goal, but still lower than the global average of 6.65%. So with respect to financial inclusion, which had been mentioned, we build our efforts to digitalize financial transactions in the Philippines through our digital payments transformation roadmap in the last 3 years or so. And this roadmap provided for the development and adoption of digital platforms such as e-wallets and online banking services to enable more efficient and cost-effective remittance transfers with lower transaction fees. By promoting the use of electronic payment systems and strengthening the digital financial infrastructure, we expect to facilitate faster and safer remittances. We have our own project. It's called the Project Nexus of our Banco Central to provide for an interoperable platform that connects payment systems across the region, harmonizing cross-border payments, reducing transaction costs, and improving remittance efficiency through regional cooperation. And this move seeks to realize the aims of our own ASEAN, our regional aggregation of Southeast Asian leaders, and their declaration on regional payment connectivity in 2023. On turning remittances into productive investments, what needs to be focused upon is equipping migrant workers and their families with financial literacy. And this is now part of our pre-migration orientation for financially ready migrant families in the Philippines. We do have, for instance, incentives such as Model OFW or Migrant Worker Family Awards that recognize migrant worker families who had successfully converted their migration experience into overall gains. In the Philippines, the DMW continues to capacitate and deputize anti-money laundering personnel. With our Anti-Money Laundering Council, as we know it, that illegal recruitment also results in huge sums of remittance transactions in and out of our country. We also have partnerships with our Securities and Exchange Commission to aid migrant worker families and migrant workers themselves to avoid being victims of investment scams. And we also have a welfare fund, a protection fund that aids workers who had been so victimized, including cooperation with host governments in terms of curbing investment scams outside of our shores and in our shores, of course, and also providing lawyers for our migrant workers to pursue the scammers who are in our shores and abroad. We also have utilized social insurance funds by way of providing mandatory membership for our migrant workers in such a manner that part of these funds are investable, mostly in government securities. Our social security system does allow for investment in private securities. But the effect of this, obviously, is to spur our economy in terms of reinvesting in government securities or private securities, and also contribute to greater benefits for our migrant workers. By way of example, our welfare fund is a $300 million fund, and about, should I say, 90% of which are invested in government securities. Because this incurs certain incomes on a yearly basis. For instance, our welfare fund administrator had declared an increase in the number of scholarships, college scholarships for migrant worker children from 2,500 to 10,000. So that's about a fourfold increase in the number of scholarship quotas that are available. We have a National Reintegration Center for OFWs, which implements programs for successful return and reintegration. We have a Trade and Industry Department that has a small business corporation that provides loans, interest-free loans to migrant workers' families and migrant workers themselves who choose to return and set up businesses in our country. We have what's called a buy local program where we have various OFW entrepreneurs who are encouraged to participate in government and private sector-led trade fairs. So it's common, for instance, for a big mall in the Philippines to have a trade fair, and at the center of these trade fairs would be migrant worker entrepreneurs. Indeed, migrant workers and their contributions to the countries of origin and destination cannot be overemphasized. Experiences have proven how remittances feed development and water the seeds of a brighter future for migrant workers and their families. The last point I'd like to make is an emphasis on remittances, not just in financial terms, but in social and should I say, academic terms. And by this, I mean the encouragement of OFWs, migrant workers who had learned to hone their skills through their experience abroad to come back and teach and re-employ themselves and set up businesses, and in the process mentor and help mentor our workforce and help our economy. By way of example, we have a balik scientist or return of scientists who had worked from abroad to help in our science and technology ministry. So, all told, we hope to learn more about opportunities for partnerships and collaborations and innovative approaches in facilitating remittance transfers, especially at the rural level, and investment avenues, especially in the agricultural sector and in climate resiliency. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Very interesting. I think we heard about remittances as counter-cyclical flows, working with migrant workers themselves to co-create options, and some very concrete examples of efforts to reduce costs, to link to fintech, incentivize financial education, many different activities. Very, very interesting. I'm now very pleased to turn to our next set of speakers. First, I'll begin with His Excellency Ekitela Lokale, Permanent Representative of Kenya to the United Nations. We're very grateful to have you with us as one of the co-facilitators as well of the IMRF declaration. We're a bit behind on time. I'm going to ask our speakers to stick really within the 5-minute mark, so it's a challenge to all of you that come next. But Your Excellency, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Muchísimas gracias, señora presidenta, excelencias.
Let me first take this opportunity to thank the French Mission and IFAD for convening this timely dialogue on a subject that's so important to very many of us. I'm particularly pleased to be sitting next to my friend and colleague, Ambassador Myers, with whom I've had the great fortune of co-facilitating the intergovernmental negotiations of the Progress Declaration on the second IMRF. It's unfortunate because we've exercised a lot of restraint to speak on this matter over the last couple of weeks, I would say months, because of our role as co-facilitators. And I was very much looking forward to speaking a bit more generously on the subject, now that the weight of co-facilitation is almost leaving my shoulders. That said, I think this discussion comes at a very opportune moment, both for my country as well as Luxembourg, as we've just concluded co-facilitating the International Migration Review Forum Progress Declaration, and are looking forward to its adoption, hopefully, this week, which will mark a critical transition from negotiations to implementation of our commitments under the Global Compact for Migration. As a champion country of the GCM, Kenya has been working to ensure that these global commitments translate into tangible gains for its citizens. By anchoring these efforts in our national strategies and tailored financial instruments, Kenya has sought to move remittances from being just short-term consumption support towards long-term productive investment with high impact in rural communities. Excellencies, I underscore that the portability of social protection benefits for migrant workers is essential to protecting their long-term welfare and enabling them to invest confidently in their communities of origin, including in rural areas. Because if migrants are able to move with their social benefits, then that means that the remittances that they will have or would ordinarily send back home will then be directed for other more productive purposes, strengthen the resilience of households, as well as deepen the development impact of diaspora engagement in local or rural communities. Just last year, Kenya's diaspora remittances crossed the $5 billion mark for the first time, which made remittances our single largest sources of foreign exchange. These flows represent far more than just monetary transfers. They embody the enduring bonds between the over 4 million Kenyans living in the diaspora and their communities back home, particularly in the rural areas where 1/3 of the $5 billion ends up. So we fully endorse the commitments in the IMRF Progress Declaration, and not because I co-facilitated, but because we believe in the things that are in that document. And also because they build on the landmark outcomes of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which we gave ourselves in Sevilla last year, and to reduce the transaction costs and eliminate those costs that disproportionately burden low-value transfers. We equally support strengthening diaspora engagement and investment, addressing barriers to financial services access, and promoting financial inclusion through digital tools. These commitments are not just aspirational. They are essential to unlocking the full development potential of rural communities. But Excellencies, commitments alone will not transform lives. In our case in Kenya, we have operationalized these principles through our diaspora investment strategy for 2025 to 2030, which shifts the paradigm of remittances from being consumption support to remittances as catalysts for productive investment, entrepreneurship, and sustainable rural transformation. We have prioritized agriculture and agribusiness, technology, and renewable energy as sectors where diaspora capital, knowledge, and networks can drive inclusive growth. And in recognition of the significant yet largely untapped potential of diaspora resources, Kenya has established the Diaspora Investment Support Office as a semi-autonomous agency within our State Department for Diaspora Affairs, with the mandate to facilitate, promote, and protect diaspora investments in Kenya. Excellencies, as I conclude, in an era where the official development assistance is on a steady decline, and with only 4 years left to the end of, to achieve rather, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, remittances and diaspora investment represent an indispensable and yet still under-leveraged sources of development finance. They are not substitutes for ODA or FDI, but rather complementary flows that deserve equal policy attention and institutional support. We hope that we'll give ourselves the progress declaration of the second IMRF later this week, and Kenya looks forward to collaborating with all member states and other stakeholders, including international organizations like IFAD and others, the private sector, and the diaspora networks, to translate the commitments in the Progress Declaration into tangible results for rural resilience, entrepreneurship, and sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm now pleased to introduce His Excellency Olivier Meis, Permanent Representative of Luxembourg to the UN and also co-facilitator of the IMRF Declaration. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I would like first to thank the co-organizers, namely the Mission of France, which is co-organized by my colleague Jérôme Bonafont, and also with IFAD for having given me the opportunity to take part in this forum, international forum. Obviously, I appreciate the support by the presidency of the G7 by France for the International Day of Transfer and their role as a catalyzer for rural development, namely. The importance of remittances and the importance to reduce the cost of these transfers, that's something that's been affirmed a number of times by the international community, namely by the first declaration in the International Forum of Migration Review, and the declaration in l'engagement de Séville, compromiso de Séville l'année dernière, last year. Et donc,
Review Forum that I had the honor to co-facilitate with my dear colleague and friend, the ambassador, permanent representative of Kenya to the United Nations, Ekitela. We have become something like an inseparable couple over the last weeks. So I'm glad that we continue our good collaboration today and in the coming days. I must say it was really a fascinating experience to negotiate this text with the participation of all member states. And I must say that the language that we have included on remittances is as strong as it was possible to get a balanced outcome. And I would also say this was the part of the text that was probably the least controversial, because I think everybody agrees on the importance of remittances, reducing the average costs of transfer. And I think we have a very good basis to move now from agreeing on a text or adopting a text, hopefully later this week, to actually making progress in the field. I will not be very long, mindful of the time, and you alerted us to that. I just want to use this opportunity to underline really the important work that IFAD is doing, in particular when it comes to diaspora finance and climate adaptation. Climate change being one of the biggest challenges to many vulnerable rural communities. And IFAD has documented how remittances can help small-scale farmers whose food production is essential to food security in rural areas to cope with climate shocks. I would also highlight the dedicated mechanism that IFAD has set up, the financing facility for remittances, which has been pioneering the mobilization of this type of private finance as a development resource. And I'm very pleased to highlight that Luxembourg has supported IFAD's financing facility for remittances since its inception in 2006. And together with IFAD, we will continue to advocate in favor of unlocking the potential of remittances for rural transformation going forward. So I wish you all a good discussion and hopefully a good outcome of this second IMRF this week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And we have the head of our financing facility for remittances here with us. We'll hear from Pedro later on, so much appreciated. I'm now happy to turn to the final speaker of this segment, Your Excellency Majda Mouchou. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Deputy Permanent Representative of Morocco to the UN, Your Excellency.
Merci beaucoup, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Thank you, first of all, in the name of my ambassador who could not be with us today, that through him I would like to thank the G7 presidency of France and IFAD for having inviting us for this event. It is a priority of France and part of its presidency, and we do appreciate that as Morocco, and amongst us les Philippines et le Guatemala, deux pays qui sont vraiment these are champion countries. I would like to first start by a very important figure. In 2005, they have the diaspora have transferred 13 billion towards Morocco. That's more than 14% of the GDP. So this is very important, and their importance to serve the rural areas. Internationally, it's over 800 billion, and it is a safety net for 800 million people. And it's part of Objective 19 and 20 of the International Pact on Migration, and also the ODD 20. We are still at 6.4%, and internationally, and 8.5% in some African region, which leaves us way behind for these SDGs. So we have payment systems that are not very interoperable, and in rural area where there's a limited access and there's a dependence on cash and a threshold that is very expensive. This actually hinders the access to these transfers, and the potential of these transfers, of these remittances, is real. However, there are challenges. Three of them I would like to highlight. First of all, the empowerment of women and youth, where we have men who are mainly migrants, because women who are actually manage these remittances, and they maintain the local economy. And however, they are the furthest from the formal financial system. Then, and their access to credit is not an option. So this is something imperative that we work on. Second is climate resiliency, because these most remote area, they are most exposed to drought and climate shocks. And so these finances should finance the adaptation, not just mere survival at the immediate level. And on the international level, we have brought this in the international trade world, WTO, and we have worked on transparency, interoperability, and it was discussed in Yaoundé in 2026. And this opened up a dialogue that WTO could play within international organization, and it is our intention to continue this work. And our partnership with IFAD is very important, and both of us, we have invested over $1.7 billion, and that helped over 700,000 rural households, and this in line with our national strategy, general green strategies that targets women and youth in rural area. Bank Al Maghreb, they worked with IFAD with a sum of over $250,000 to help with food security. Digit Maroc and gives access to digital financial services that targets women and youth. We look to expand this cooperation, and today, in the context of this second international forum, and so we should adopt the tax this Friday. I believe this is very important. And we have to reduce these costs to less than 3% within 2030, and including in these financial mechanism of women. And we highlight the contribution of Luxembourg and Cunha and their work to achieve consensus on the document at the end, the international dossier. The rural families depend on these remittances. They are not asking for aid. They need a clear framework and adequate tools to transform these remittances to sustainable rural development. Thank you.
Very clear call at the end. I think we have our homework laid out for us. Before I turn to my colleague to start with the technical panel, and our great thanks to all of our high-level speakers this morning. Very well set to the stage for the technical panel that will follow. I believe we have a short video on the joint campaign between IFAD and the French G7 presidency for the International Day of Family Remittances that we'll show right now.
Every year, millions of people living and working abroad send money home to their families. Over the last 15 years, remittances sent to lower and middle income countries have more than doubled, reaching over $650 billion in 2024. These flows are critical to national economies. They provide one of the most important and reliable sources of external finance. In 60 countries, remittances account for over 5% of GDP, but their true impact is felt at home. They help families meet everyday needs, putting food on the table, supporting education, and covering healthcare. Around 30% of remittances reach rural areas, where they are most needed and where much of our food is produced. Each year, an estimated $25 billion is invested in agriculture and food systems, supporting rural livelihoods. Since the UN established the International Day of Family Remittances in 2018, governments, financial institutions, and partners have worked together to make remittances more accessible. Today they are faster, safer, and cheaper than ever before. As climate shocks increase and young people seek opportunities closer to home, the role of remittances is growing. This year, IFAD and the French presidency of the G7 are calling for greater action, with a focus on building rural resilience, entrepreneurship, and employment. Connecting families to the services, skills, and opportunities they need helps them make more of remittances, planning ahead, growing businesses, and strengthening local economies. With the right commitment, we can maximize the impact of every dollar, because remittances don't just support families today, they create more secure futures for millions.
Good, nice change of pace and to see some of the impact on the ground. I'm very happy now to introduce Pedro de Vasconcelos, manager of the financing facility for remittances at IFAD, who will take us over to our technical panel. Over to you, Pedro.
Thank you, Courtney, and colleagues, ambassadors, for your presence here today. Not only that, colleagues and friends, there's a lot of stories. If we have an international day, it's because France told us to do that at IFAD in 2015 and to take it to the UNGA, where other champions actually brought it, and today we're around this table on this reality with examples. Thank you for Luxembourg to be part of that for the last 20 years in bringing reality and what innovations that can be scaled, and this is what we have done together in the areas where it matters the most. We have little time, so the idea really now for the next panel, it is not to hear what IFAD has been doing. I would love to do that, but it's to bring others to do that. And the idea here, since we've seen the impact that this has also in rural area, was to explore a little bit more the evidence, what we know about the impact of remittances. We know many of you have it, but can we explore a little bit more about that? Who are the actors? We often think that it is either a policy from governments, or we hear about the private sector or the civil society. Maybe it's a conjunction of that. So maybe if we can understand a little bit about the actors that are involved to reach the goal that we are setting ourselves to. And third, the markets and the role of financial systems and providers to do that, particularly when we go beyond the costs. So with that perspective, I think we can not only look at what already is working, but also what needs to change to really unlock the full potential of remittances. So for this, I would like to bring three panelists for this discussion today that I think can help us look into that. And my first panelist will be from the Inter-American Dialogue, Manuel Orozco, expert, also a longtime friend on this. And to try to bring us under 5 minutes now, a perspective on this experience and most recent research that can show us how remittances contribute to rural development. It's a generic question, difficult to answer on the time frame, but Manuel, if you could bring this to bear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the organizers for the Philippines, Guatemala, France, Kenya, Luxembourg, Morocco, and other delegates, and IFAD, of course. The way to think about this is relatively simple. From an economic perspective, you have three dimensions of the contribution of remittances, and particularly to rural development. The first one is that the sheer volume, the sheer quantity of money is significant. It goes without saying that we're talking about, at least from the U.S., for Latin America in particular, we're talking about 42 million households that receive remittances. And that's a volume of $180 billion. That's about 27% of the total global remittances volume. But what matters more than the money is that the number of households that receive it. And for small countries of those in Central America and the Caribbean, we're basically talking about at least 1/3, 1 in 3 households that depends on the flow of money. Now, the other way to look at this is from a micro and macroeconomic perspective, and is the impact that remittances have on private consumption. As you know, private consumption captures basically 85% of GDP. Well, remittances, at least in Latin America and the Caribbean, comes to represent 35% of private consumption. And this has a significant effect on food consumption, on nutrition, but of course, it varies from country to country. If you look at the impact of remittances in Cuba and Haiti, for example, you're talking about effective, immediate food security. If you're looking at other countries like Mexico or Guatemala, you're looking at an impact in improved quality of life. But what's fascinating is that it is reaching into levels related to the environment, to climate change. For example, in Guatemala, there are communities that still have problems in access to water. Remittance recipients are investing their money into buying water filters. And those have really an effect on your quality of life. The other impact on private consumption is that it does have a multiplying effect on the local economy. Every dollar that people consume from remittances actually multiplies at least 3 times. And then the third element, it's, well, the impact on finance. the impact on finance is significant at different levels. And the most important one is that it increases among remittance recipient households in rural areas their ability to invest in agriculture, to invest in equipment, in buying seeds or supplies in general. And it's not a small piece, particularly because rural areas are more likely to be more affected or more disadvantaged when it comes to financial access. And just as an illustration, take the countries in Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, or Guatemala. 70% of access to credit goes to urban areas, but it goes to very specific cities, urban centers, but there is very little access to credit in very rural areas, and remittances tend to improve or mitigate that impact. So you have a significant element, and then there is another key aspect, is that when there are interventions providing financial access among remittance recipients by formalizing their savings or investing through this financial sector, the intention to migrate is less likely. You develop a sense of rootedness. And this is not a political marketing speech, it's a fact. The intention to migrate changes when you invest in the local community. Now, if we were talking about development 25 years ago, we would be referring to issues like building assets. Today, in the age of the digital economy of artificial intelligence, what remittances are doing is actually deepening financial inclusion and accessing this type of new tools. And we see it in education. Households tend to invest up to 5% of their income among those who receive remittances into education, buying school supplies, but also now investing in technologies that allow them to consume these new products. And one of the consumptions is data. And that's one of the impacts that remittances have had in several of these countries. So instead of 10 minutes, I'm going to close in 5. Thank you.
But I have a follow-up question, that if there's any trends, basically, that you're witnessing right at the moment, particularly when it comes to economic and climate resilience?
Look, I think there are two or three main realities taking place, and Mr. Hans alluded to some of them when it comes to the fact that access to pension funds, being able to pay for your pensions, being able to contribute to your social security from abroad is fundamental. And there are very few countries that you can count with your hand that actually have an effective system. Philippines is one of them. But many other countries do not have the procedures, the technology to allow migrants to invest back home, buying bonds, for example, not diaspora bonds. I'm talking about state sovereign bonds. Investing in your pension. This is an important trend that needs to take place. There is a demand among those lines in the diaspora. The second one is that we are definitely faced with a paradox. There is a significant demand for foreign labor in the global economy, but at the same time, we see increased restrictions to migration. And Latin America, in fact, is going to suffer significantly from this. And it's important to push harder into legal labor pathways that allow migration to take place in a regularized fashion. The impact of it is significant, and we can see it, for example, in the H-2A and H-2B visas that the United States handles, especially to Mexico, that actually have a stabilizing effect in the local economies of their hometowns. Now, this really needs to be more system-wide. Those are key developments that I think we need to pay attention.
Thank you very much, Manuel, Inter-American Dialogue, for this vision that we also share. Then I would like to go to my colleague Veronica Stuttgart from IMTN. to bring the reality of the markets, because for all this to happen, you have to respond to market forces around remittances. So it would be great to hear from you how you think the market realities shape the development impact that we talk about remittances, and of course, particularly in rural areas, as Manuel already mentioned some of the issues there. So could you illustrate this the realities?
Yes, thank you very much, Pedro, for the invitation. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm representing the private sector, so on the other side of many of you. First of all, I would like you to, I will stick to 5 minutes, but I would like you please to understand what is IMTN and why do we have IMTN, why do we exist. So I set up myself a money transfer, so I walk the path. IMTN was born in 2005 when policymakers were not much aware or paying attention to this industry. So we come from that time. And one of the things I would like to remark, yes, we are private sector. We have commercial interests. We have investors that we have to respond to. But one of the things I want to highlight here is IMTN was born because the remittance industry needed, and the migrants needed a voice, and IMTN became that voice. And one of the things that I want to highlight is all these remittance companies that you see nowadays. If you look at them, the remittance industry is a remittance built by migrants to serve migrants. So we understand what are the needs, and that's the reason why we managed to walk the path, and understand exactly what are the needs that these migrants have. The market shape the remittance industry today. And for that, I would like to highlight especially 3 topics about it. One is access. Access is in rural areas is key because we are facing limited agencies, weak interoperability, unreliable liquidity. And for example, the beneficiary in rural areas have to spend a lot of time to go and sometimes collect the funds somewhere, and then arrive there, and it happens that there's no liquidity, come back tomorrow, and like that. So that creates frictions, and that's where we need to work out more. We need to work and to be able to arrive to the final consumer. But it's not just, and this final consumer in some cases, it's not just that they waste time and money going to collect the funds. The problem that we have also here is that it reveals that there is another pain there, that is that the payment rails are not working correctly. And that's the domestic payment rails sometimes. And the problem that will happen is that these migrants, the beneficiary, will go to sometimes to informal channels in order to receive those funds. The funds will arrive, but it will not have the power to anchor to formal financial systems, and that's what we want. We want to improve the remittance services in a way that it can be scaled up. The second one I wanted to mention is cost. We talk a lot about cost, and we work a lot about reducing the cost of remittances. We've been working, Pedro mentioned, and it was mentioned on the video, the International Day of Family Remittances came in 2011. I remember 2015 discussing with Pedro about that, and before that, we've been working together for long about trying to reduce the cost of remittances and trying to understand the frictions. What are the frictions that are there? Because it's not just the cost. It's not that we put the cost because we want to put the cost. There are many frictions. There's liquidity, offshore effects. And we need to think that remittances is money gets in before it gets out. So we need to be prepared for that. So in rural areas, that we discussed, it was mentioned that the cost of I congratulate Philippines, by the way, 4%, my respect. But average price, yes, is correct. It's around $6.65, something like that, around that. But in rural areas, we still have between 8 to 10%. And, this comes from many different things. It's not just the liquidity. It also comes about regulation, about fragmented regulation that we have. It comes about how do we apply AML standards, CFT, because, I've been working a lot in Africa, and from, I think it's 14 countries, gray listed, or 20-something, majority are Africans. Have you ever tried to send money to a bank account in Africa? We need to educate our regulators, or we need to support them, to regulators, and to support, everyone that needs to be aware of these things. We do not want to lose visibility of those funds. We need to have enhanced due diligence. And with enhanced due diligence, we will not add risk. And this is affecting especially rural migrants, the rural areas, because, it's mostly in those areas where there are more frictions to arrive, and especially this. And then the usage. Remittances still remains cash out, and that we need to change it. And that's something that we are doing from the private sector, but we need the support of all of you. We are working, one of the biggest examples that we always like to highlight is M-Pesa, Safaricom. Safaricom is part of our network, so we do know very well Safaricom, and they've been doing, they do loans for agriculture, they do all the financial services, the banking. It's not just the sending money from one wallet to another. They even expanded. Tanzania, you can have M-Pesa. You have more and more. And like that, we do have more wallets, more M-Pesas, I would say. We have GCash in Philippines. Amazing how it's working. But we need to support more that. We need to support. So I am from the private sector. I know I'm coming with a completely different view, very pragmatic. But, like we say in my country, we need two for tango. So definitely, we need the support of all the members in the state. And I hope I did stick to.
Yes, she's from Argentina. But I have a follow-up question then. What is a win-win from the private sector? What would you call, really, under 1 minute, how do you see a win-win situation?
From the private sector, the win-win situation will not come without all of you, without the member states supporting us. And one of the things I would like to, if I need to ask for something, is please not only harmonize regulation, but also harmonize enforcement and interpretation of regulation. I'm sitting in Europe. I work in Europe. I work with European regulation. I know I have 2 licenses, waiting for 2 more, and we have one regulation, 27 countries, one regulation for 27 countries. We have 27 interpretations and 27 different supervisions. And that needs to change. Because if we cannot do it in developed countries, how are we going to support rural areas? How are we going to support other countries that are in emerging market, gray listed countries? I have more, but I will stick to that one right now.
No, you said it, I didn't say it. So the message is passed. This is why you're here. But I think we today what you've seen, there's a vision from member states, development organizations, the private sector. I would like to go to the civil society in this regard, and maybe for Rose Koputsinji from the African Non-State Actors Platform. Thank you for joining us. And it's a very simple question, but in the same approach, the role of the diaspora organizations in facilitating remittances and diaspora investment towards rural development as a whole. So maybe you could give us your perspective on that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think I have the pleasure to speak last in the panel, meaning that they have spoken all the nice things. But I'm stepping in for Paddy, who could not make it here today because of visa issues. And speaking on behalf of the African Non-State Actor Platform, which is a Pan-African member-based platform that brings together the diaspora, individual organizations, civil society, trade unions on migration and development. And we are guided by the 2023 Abuja Declaration. And our work focuses on climate mobility, on development, on legal pathways and everything that non-state actors are working towards, collaborating with governments and everyone. We see our role as co-designers and as partners, not as observers. And because of that, it means that our diaspora organizations that are part of the platform, we recognize how diverse they are. We have those that are working at national, we have those that are generational, we have those that are gender-based, those that are cultural and professional. And because of everything that I've been hearing here, it's important to emphasize that the diasporas are diverse and different. And because of that, we need to see and consider how do they support communities and how do they support entrepreneurship and livelihoods. And of course, we're talking about, I'm coming in from an African perspective, the challenges that we're facing in Africa rural communities, including food security, climate change, displacement from floods and landslides and all that. How can we leverage the diversity of diaspora organizations and individuals, of course, to leverage on solutions that are locally led? And it's also a pleasure to hear actually some of the points that the platform has been raising, because on the road to IMRF, we've been organizing webinars, bringing together the diaspora and understanding their challenges, their opportunities, and their aspirations, and hearing about, the focus of the current remittances focusing on consumption. It's a point that we've been raising, but we've also realized that actually a lot of diaspora networks have shifted away from individual contribution. We see in Zambia, the diaspora health associations have supported rural clinics through medical supplies and professional collaboration. We've seen in Cameroon, we have initiatives such as Mabumpi that are using digital tools to reach children in off-grid communities with education support. And in Burkina Faso, we see the diaspora organizations like Mbi Music Support School supporting feeding and creative programs for children in vulnerable situations. So that being said, we see that engaging the diaspora, some of the gaps that I could add on is the generational gap. We see the second and subsequent generations in the diaspora, their engagement is still limited. And I'm glad to hear Morocco spoke about youth and women. Young people and women are facing different challenges. But also, if you look at their opportunities that they have, the knowledge and the skills they have gathered, we are missing a very key investment opportunity. We are missing a very key leverage to integrate and support rural development. As a diaspora myself and as a young person, I'll give you now a much smaller example. I'm working with, in Uganda, where I come from, I'm working with climate displaced communities that were displaced by floods, and there's a big gap between investment within climate displaced communities where the government is trying, but there's the biggest gap I've ever seen. And we are working and linking displaced communities who are living in an IDP camp with local technicians and rural development actors, training them from the beginning to the end on climate-smart agriculture, how to find access to high-quality, drought-resistant seedlings and tilling land and mulching and all that, and how to market and getting to the market, and we're doing all that. So how we see some of the practical actions that member states can take on. First is, of course, what everyone has been talking about, is reducing the cost of remittances and removing taxes that limit their development impact. I recently wrote a policy brief, and I was arguing that a lot of the money that is lost in when we are making these remittances can be very big investments in climate. I'm a climate person, so I'll direct it to climate adaptation. I couldn't imagine when I'm sending money to my parents, for instance, the money that I lose could buy a cow, for instance. I come from an agricultural background, could buy a cow in 1 year. And how much adaptation are we losing in that? Second, advancing portability of social protection and social security benefits. And third is strengthening decent work and skill recognition, as well as social cohesion and integrating peace building. And I think this is the gap that we've been missing. we're seeing uprising everywhere, even within the African continent. I want to name call, but we know what is happening right now as we speak in the African continent. The anti-migrant sentiments across Europe and across Africa. Excellencies, diaspora organizations are already contributing to rural development, to agriculture, to green jobs. But what is lacking right now is the systems that are built on trust and proximity and sustained engagement, not one-off engagement. As a platform, we remain committed to strengthening coordination, mobilizing diaspora, mobilizing organizations, mobilizing individuals, and engaging in GCM implementation process. And that said, we invite you to our side events on Wednesday. We have a side event at Church Center. If you want to know more, we can talk later. But finally, I would like to acknowledge all the member states that are taking steps forwards. Really excited to hear what everyone is doing, and would like also to hear some of the challenges that you're facing, because it's not all gold, right? Would like to hear and how us as civil society can come in and support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose, for this. Unfortunately, we're running really behind, but I will still undecided with the co-chairs to give it 5 minutes for either statements or questions to the panelists. If it is a statement, it's under 1 minute, and I'll be tough on that one. So I don't know if there's any questions from the floor to our panelists. I will give the priority to that. I think there's one. If you don't mind, just state your name to who you're addressing the question, if it is a question. Okay.
Question can't be translated because she's not speaking into a mic.
And it's the question about blockchain.
Microphone, please.
Are working on blockchain. Many remittance companies are using stable coins, especially USDC and EURC, for cash management and settlement. We managed to lower, in some cases, the cost of the remittances. We managed to reduce the number of intermediaries there. And yes, I am personally working on stable coins. So if you want to know more, we can discuss. But one thing I want to make clear also now that I can, when we talk about stable coins and blockchain, we normally say, don't fix it if it's not broken. Mm-hmm. So stable coins, blockchain work very well in certain cases. In cases where, for example, domestic and international rails talk to each other, there's no need. I would not use personally stable coins in SEPA. SEPA works well. Why would I do that? So we are using it, and one of the things that we are pushing for is we want to have clear regulation and clear consumer protection that protects consumer on this. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that, I believe actually IFAD and the dialogue are thinking about putting a little blog together just on this, so you will hear about it pretty soon. Any other? I see. Yes, please. If you can introduce yourself and the question to whom.
Elias Nyambwe from the Liberian Mission, Minister Councilor. I just wanted to find out from Lucifer and Kenya, the offices are set up. If there is any monitoring or evaluation, if it is done, how effective it is, because if you set up the offices and you want the remittances to get to who they're supposed to get to, I think there should be monitoring and evaluation. So I want to know how effective that can be.
We do have monitoring. Mm-hmm. We do have regulators that
microphone, please.
Regularly. So it's not a surprise for remittance companies that they have annual, sometimes regulation. At the same time, we do need to report. So in some countries, the report is monthly. In some countries, is daily. So yes, we do have a lot of that. So lot of compliance cost, yes, is there, and that's one of the things why also remittances can have the fee they have. Yes, but we do agree that regulation should be there because we want the flows to go on the formal channel rather than informal.
Thank you. There is one last question, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Thomas from the...
You can do it here.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to preface my question by commending Philippines for 4% remittance rate, which is strange. In our case and in many countries in Africa, remittance is now used as a policy tool to cushion the economy, especially from recent macroeconomic shocks. What is the specific lesson that countries like ours can learn from the Philippines to ensure that the rate is not higher than maybe 5% or stay within the SDG range? What can we learn from your example?
Well, I'm not a finance person. I was reporting. But as far as I know, we've been working closely with our Banco Central, and I know that we have been encouraging a lot of fintech and financial education and open financing. The Globe is one of the big telecoms who had engaged in GCash transactions, the G standing for Globe. So I know there's been a lot of open market facilitation. Our president has been very strong in terms of encouraging free competition along these lines. And I think also we have partnered with, I just saw the UAE side in that part of the room, and I know we have partnered with many financial institutions abroad, including in the Gulf states, including UAE, that had effectively lowered remittance, not just remittance. I would always like to present recruitment costs as part of the equation. Employer pays principals and checks, regulatory checks on how does a worker pay en route to being deployed, because that will have an effect on payment of loans and such when it is time to remit. So these things, I think, bear heavily in the equation. But having said that, I'm sure our Department of Finance would have a better answer to that question. And lastly, I think we've also had some currency rate exchange monitoring, because we know for sure that even if on paper remittance costs are low, but something may happen by way of currency exchanges that can be reflective of surcharge or overcharging. The suggestion on blockchain technology would be very handy. My impression of blockchain technology is it makes transactions more transparent. And I think currency exchange, possible currency exchange irregularities, which unfortunately happen, could possibly be checked along the way. So at the top of my mind, those are the responses.
Thank you very much for that. The truth is that we will need another 3 days for this. So I invite you to the next Global Forum on Remittance, Investment and Development that we host. And that's literally 3 days of this. We really need to close before the next proceedings. I just really wanted to thank all the panelists for this. We've looked at the reality of remittances. We touched upon some of the gaps that exist, enabling markets, empowering diaspora actors, and integrating remittances in policy frameworks. At IFAD, we've done a lot of that. There's in the sense that we see all the opportunities that exist. But what I invite you is, till June 16, it's really to contribute your views, but also your questions in this Universal International Day of Family Remittances. We're very proud this year to be launching also a campaign with France on this in order to promote remittances for rural resilience, entrepreneurship, and employment. Your voice should be heard in that regard. So thank you so much for the panelists, the co-hosts, and also the co-facilitators for their presence and support on this topic. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.